On the surface, the Dickason family looked like the definition of success. Two respected doctors, a large home, financial stability, and three long-awaited children. To friends and neighbors, they were disciplined, educated, and deeply committed to family life. But behind that polished image was a decade of grief, medical trauma, and psychological strain that slowly eroded the foundation of their lives. Lauren Dickason had wanted children for as long as she could remember. She and her husband Graham spent years trying to conceive, enduring 17 rounds of IVF. The emotional and physical toll was immense. One pregnancy ended at 18 weeks. The baby had a heartbeat, but under medical definitions, it was classified as a clinical loss. There was no funeral, no goodbye, only an abrupt ending that left Lauren shattered. She cried daily for months, struggling to process a loss that society barely acknowledged. Eventually, donor eggs gave the couple another chance. Their first daughter, Leon, was born. Later, twins Maya and Carla followed. To the outside world, the struggle was over. The dream had finally come true. But motherhood did not bring Lauren peace. Instead, it intensified something already fragile within her. Lauren had a long history of anxiety and depression. After Leanne's birth, she was diagnosed with postpartum depression and major depressive disorder. She lived in a constant state of fear, obsessively worried about accidents, illnesses, and imagined threats. She loved her children, but that love was fused with relentless terror. Medication helped stabilize her condition, and with professional support, she managed to function. For a time, life appeared balanced. The family lived comfortably in South Africa. They had a nanny, household help, and a large home that provided structure and routine. But Lauren's anxiety never fully disappeared. She was hyper-vigilant, controlling, and emotionally exhausted. Friends described her as a devoted but restless mother who could never relax. Then the world changed. When the COVID pandemic hit, South Africa experienced strict lockdowns and violent civil unrest. Riots, looting, and chaos filled the news. Lauren became convinced that the country was no longer safe for her children. Her anxiety escalated into something closer to panic. She saw danger everywhere and believed escape was the only solution. The decision to move to New Zealand felt, to Lauren, like salvation. A quiet country, a fresh start, a place where her children could grow up safe. But what she did not realize was that the move would remove every remaining layer of support she had. The stability she relied on was about to vanish, and with it, the fragile balance holding her mental health together. This was not the beginning of a crime, it was the beginning of isolation. And isolation is often where tragedies quietly take shape. Immigrating during a global pandemic is not a clean escape. It is pressure layered on top of pressure. For Lauren Dickason, the move to New Zealand did not bring relief. It dismantled the remaining structures that had kept her functioning. Before leaving South Africa, Lauren made a decision that would later become central to the case. She stopped taking her antidepressant medication. Officially, her psychiatrist had documented that she was stable and did not require mandatory treatment. Medication was listed as optional. But Lauren feared that any record of ongoing mental illness could jeopardize the family's immigration approval. She believed stopping medication was necessary to protect their future. The journey itself was exhausting. Mandatory isolation before departure, a positive COVID test for one of the children, extended quarantine, endless uncertainty. Lauren described this period as mentally unbearable. She was trapped in confined spaces with 3 young children while carrying the full weight of fear about their future. When the family finally arrived in New Zealand, they were quarantined again. Weeks inside a hotel room with limited movement and no privacy. Graham tried to remain optimistic, but Lauren was deteriorating. The sense of control she desperately needed was slipping away. Once quarantine ended, reality hit fast. Graham returned to hospital work almost immediately. New Zealand's healthcare system was understaffed, and his skills were urgently needed. Lauren stayed home alone with the children in an unfamiliar country. There was no nanny, no relatives, no trusted friends. Everything that once supported her was gone. The children gravitated toward their father. They asked constantly when he would return from work. They waited by the door. To Lauren, this felt like rejection. She began to see herself as unnecessary, incompetent, and invisible within her own family. Her self-worth collapsed further. She told friends she was overwhelmed. She complained that the children were too loud, too demanding, too much. But these comments were brushed off as normal parental stress. No one recognized the danger forming beneath the surface. Lauren tried to present strength. She exercised regularly. She managed the household. She smiled in public. But internally, she felt like she was failing at the one role that defined her identity: being a good mother. On the night of September 14th, 2021, Lauren barely slept. The next day required everything she had left: school drop-offs, kindergarten schedules, household tasks, emotional exhaustion without rest. At 10:47 that morning, she received a photo from the kindergarten teacher. Maya and Carla were sitting at a table, smiling while eating lunch. It was ordinary, peaceful. No one looking at that photo could imagine what was coming. That afternoon, the children cried repeatedly. One missed her father. One was still uncomfortable after a recent fall. Lauren could not soothe them. She tried food. She tried routines. Nothing worked. Each cry felt like proof of her failure. By early evening, Graham left the house to attend a work meeting. He expected to return later that night. Lauren was alone. What happened next would become one of the most disturbing family tragedies in New Zealand's history. After Graham left for his evening meeting, the house grew quiet. The kind of quiet that follows hours of crying, exhaustion, and emotional overload. Lauren was alone with 3 children who no longer listened to her and no longer responded to her attempts at comfort. To an outside observer, this would have looked like a normal, difficult evening. To Lauren, it felt like confirmation that she had completely failed as a mother. Sometime after Graham left, the children began crying again. The noise overwhelmed her. Later, Lauren would say that her thoughts became fixed and narrow, focused on a single belief: that she was incapable of caring for them properly, that the world they were growing into was dangerous, that no one else could protect them the way she once had imagined she could. Lauren went into the garage and retrieved a package of plastic cable ties. These were ordinary household items, nothing that would immediately suggest violence. She returned to the children and told them they were going to make necklaces. To the twins, Maya and Carla, this sounded like a game. They trusted her completely. They did not resist. They had no reason to. Leon, the eldest, reacted differently. She sensed something was wrong. She became angry and shouted at her mother. She tried to pull away. This resistance would later be cited by the prosecution as evidence that Lauren knew exactly what she was doing and that at least one child understood the danger. Lauren continued. During the act, Lauren later told investigators that she believed she was sparing her daughters from future suffering. She did not report hearing voices or experiencing hallucinations. Her thinking was distorted, but not detached from reality. She believed her actions were necessary. This belief was central to the trial. When the children were unresponsive, Lauren attempted to harm herself. She consumed large amounts of prescription medication. She did not lose consciousness immediately. Instead, she collapsed onto the kitchen floor, drifting in and out of awareness for hours. When Graham returned home later that evening, something felt wrong instantly. Lauren was sitting on the kitchen floor. She spoke in a flat, disconnected tone. Her words did not make sense. Alarmed, Graham ran upstairs. In Leon's bedroom, he found his daughter motionless. He rushed to the twins' room and found Maya and Carla in the same condition. Plastic cable ties were still in place. He screamed. He tried desperately to remove them, but could not. He ran downstairs for scissors. He shouted at Lauren, but she did not respond. He cut the ties from each child, one by one, begging for signs of life. There were none. Graham ran to a neighbor who worked at the local hospital. Together, they tried to revive the children. Emergency services were called. When police and paramedics arrived, there was nothing to be done. Lauren was found alive. She was conscious, subdued, and emotionally vacant. Medication packaging was discovered in the trash. Toxicology tests later showed no alcohol or illegal substances, only prescription drugs. 3 children were dead. Their mother was taken into custody, and the world began asking a question that had no comfortable answer. Lauren Dickason was charged with 3 counts of murder. From the beginning, the case forced the public to confront an uncomfortable question. Was this the act of a calculated killer, or the tragic result of a mind destroyed by mental illness? The defense argued insanity, Psychiatric experts testified that Lauren suffered from severe depression, anxiety, and distorted thinking. They claimed she believed her children would be better off dead than left behind in a world she perceived as cruel and unsafe. According to the defense, her actions were driven by a twisted form of altruism, not malice. The prosecution rejected this explanation. They focused on planning, sequence, and awareness. Lauren retrieved the cable ties deliberately. She targeted the children one by one. She attempted suicide only after the act. Most importantly, she had previously warned her husband that she feared she might hurt the children. Those warnings were not acted upon. Graham's testimony was devastating. He admitted that his wife had expressed thoughts of harming the girls on more than one occasion. He believed she was speaking hypothetically, not confessing intent. He trusted that her professional background and past treatment meant she would never cross that line. The jury listened to weeks of expert testimony. Psychiatrists debated whether Lauren understood the moral and legal nature of her actions. The difference between mental illness and legal insanity became the center of the case. After 4 weeks, the verdict was delivered, guilty on all counts. The jury rejected the insanity defense. They concluded that Lauren knew what she was doing and knew it was wrong, even if her reasoning was deeply distorted. In June 2024, Lauren Dickason was sentenced to 18 years in prison. She was ordered to remain in a secure mental health facility until deemed stable enough for transfer to a correctional institution. As the sentence was read, Lauren sat motionless, quietly sobbing. Even members of the jury were seen crying as they left the courtroom. But the true tragedy did not end with a verdict. Leanne was 6 years old. She had just started school in a new country. She was curious, energetic, and excited about the future. Maya and Carla were 2 years old, toddlers who loved play, comfort, and routine. Children who depended completely on the adults around them to keep them safe. This case is not a story about evil mothers. It is a story about ignored warnings, about how society minimizes maternal mental health crises, about how words like, "I am afraid I might hurt my children," are dismissed as stress instead of treated as emergencies. Lauren asked for help. She expressed fear. She showed signs of collapse. The system did not intervene. Her family did not intervene. By the time the danger was undeniable, it was irreversible. 3 lives were lost, not because no one cared, but because no one acted soon enough. This is why stories like this matter, not to shock, but to teach. Because the difference between a tragedy prevented and a tragedy remembered is often whether someone takes a warning seriously before it is too late.